Welcome to Future Economies Start with Youth, the podcast. My name is Kevin, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about a very important topic, localizing impact in development. And most importantly, we're going to be zooming in on CFYE's approach to localization. And naturally, who better to talk about this topic than CFYE's Country Leads, who are active on the field. Welcome so much, you three. It's an honor to be able to have you in the studio today. We have Ola Farrag, CFYE Country Lead from Egypt. We have Lina Al Khawaja, CFYE Country Lead in Jordan. And last but not least, we have Andrew Magunda, CFYE Country Lead in Uganda. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I think it's important to set the stage. We're going to be talking about localization, but it's important to realize that localization is indeed context specific. So Andrew, I want to start off with you. How do you see localization, and what does localization mean for you in your context?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. So localization to a Ugandan means involving or giving more decision-making power, more funding, more leadership to local and national actors when designing, when implementing, and when closing out development interventions. So in a nutshell, localization would be putting the local actors in the lead as you do the interventions.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned as a Ugandan and for a Ugandan. Ola, before we started recording, you also mentioned something interesting in terms of the context specificness of localization. How do you see it?
Well, I agree with my colleague Andrew, but I'd like to add to that as well that for in the Egyptian context, we would look at bringing the foreign concepts on board and contextualizing it to the Egyptian way. So when we talk about women empowerment, youth empowerment, even diversity, inclusion, what does it mean in the Egyptian context, and not just having a blanket concept coming in and putting it in the new countries that you're trying to work in. So it may mean different things in different countries. It may mean women empowerment for Egyptian women is different than for Jordanian women, is different from Ugandan women, and we need to contextualize that to each country.
Yeah, exactly. You said conceptualizing the concepts. And Andrew, I want to move back to you now. Why is it important to have localization?
I've seen this already happening, the importance in my country, because several programs have done this. And so I think one of the most important things is that when you do localization, you're trying to be a little bit more culturally sensitive and culturally appropriate, because then you're ensuring that whatever interventions you're doing put into consideration the beliefs, the norms of the people in that context, in that country, and that means that you're going to be prioritizing their needs, because then you're looking at their own norms and beliefs. But I also think that when you do that with all the people involved, when you do localization, it means local stakeholder involvement improves in the development interventions, and that is very powerful because it informs more ownership for the programs that you're running. And I think also localization is very important because then you are putting the local actors in charge of their own development, how powerful that can be, because then everything seems to be more gelling with what they do on ground. And I think that also informs inclusivity of the programs that you're running. It means more program sustainability because people are doing what they love to do. And I think that connects them to the interventions that you're running.
Yeah, now I just, before I move on to Ola, I just want to ask you a quick question. You're a CFYE Country Lead. Let's just take that hat off for 1 second and talk as a Ugandan. Do you see that the programs that are taking place in Uganda, do you see that localization is an important thing, and is it happening in those programs?
It is happening. If you let me, I will give some examples. I've seen health programs that have been running for 5 years with the involvement of the people like USAID and all the other development corporations. And then probably when they're getting to about the 3rd year, 4th year, 5th year, they start thinking how can they leave these programs behind, and they continue to run. And it is indeed happening because we've seen them transfer operational support, transfer even all the different machinery and everything, equipment, to the different organizations that are in country that are able to assimilate these and continue with these interventions. So it is happening. Yeah,
no, good to hear. Now, Ola, we just heard from Andrew that it is happening within his context, but let's broaden out now to not only in your case, the Egyptian context, but overall. We all know, and we just heard from Andrew also, that localization is important, but unfortunately, it's quite hard to reach. So, what are the barriers? Why is localization so hard to reach, and why are we only pinpointing some examples because only some things are going right when it should be overall?
That's a really good question, Kevin. So there are a number of factors and barriers that impedes us being able to reach the localization. And the first one, unfortunately, is the lack of cultural sensitivity when international organizations come into work in developing countries. This lack of cultural sensitivity, maybe even because they don't have the same belief system, it will eventually cause resistance from the local communities to adopting what international organizations are putting forward. Another issue is the balance in power. So, well, you come in with the money. Yeah. You're technically more powerful than the local communities, and then you start dictating a lot of what you want to do on the ground. And that marginalizes the voices of the local communities. Again, they will resist moving forward with your suggestions. And even if you do have solutions, it will be time limited. It will not be long term. It will not be sustainable because the local communities will not be moving forward with it after you leave. You're only time bound, so you're not going to be there forever. So eventually you want this to have a long-term sustainable impact. Another issue is the funding constraints. Of course, they come in, they have certain priorities they want to put forward that don't match the local priorities. And this, again, would cause an issue with creating sustainable solutions. And finally, unfortunately, is the fragmented efforts that are being on the ground. So some international organizations are doing something, NGOs are doing something, private sector is doing something. They're all doing something apart from one another and not together. And therefore, we're duplicating effort, we're not listening to one another, we're not building on one another. And this, of course, is a big problem and it impedes localization of efforts on the ground.
Now, Ola, thank you so much for your answer. And within your answer, I recognize some things. You mentioned the fact that some marginalized voices don't often get heard. You mentioned that these big companies, organizations, and IGOs come in with the money. They're the ones bossing everyone around, you can say. So they don't really listen to the marginalized communities, and this is quite a problem. How does CFYE tackle this? I'm assuming it's also a problem for CFYE. How do you see that?
Well, of course, technically it should be a problem with CFYE, but we've taken a different approach. We work directly with local private sector companies. And so when you work with the private sector, you're bringing onto the table scalability and innovation. While they're local businesses as well, so you're also bringing that deep contextual understanding of the market and the country that you're working in. And you're also bringing the trust from the local communities and the buy-in of the local community. So this approach, you're bringing the resources that we bring from CFYE with the expertise in the country and then creating together impactful, youthful employment opportunities, which is a win-win situation for both sides.
Yeah, I want to jump back to the women's situation and move now also back to the power imbalance that you mentioned. Could you talk a little bit more on how to work and support these local implementing partners, especially looking at big organizations as Palladium or CFYE?
So it's very important, first of all, that you take more of the, like our colleague was saying, local ownership. So you want to give them decision-making power. You want to give them the local ownership. You also want to ensure that they have the expertise. So you'll be giving them a lot of training and capacity building, because once you leave, as you're time-bound, you want to ensure that it's a sustainable solution and they'll continue to grow even after CFYE leaves. You also need to be very transparent and open with your communication with the local partners, and together co-create solutions on the ground for the market, and that fit the local market needs, not what we think is best for the country. So it's really what the market needs, and you co-create it together. Fair partnership is also very important, so your voice counts as much as equally as your local partner's voice, all the while looking at sustainability and long-term impact.
Exactly. And I love what you mentioned is exactly not what we think the country needs, but what the country actually needs. It's something I see often also in my daily work. You know, people sitting in The Hague, sitting in Washington, New York, dictate what should be done instead of listening to the people. So thank you so much. It's quite interesting hearing from your perspective. Lina, I want to move now to you. You know, as working and collaborating in collaboration with local partners is so important. We just heard that from Olga. The question arises in my head: how does CFYE acquire and identify these local partners to work with?
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. So I think our approach is a bit different. So in CFYE, we launch several competitive context-specific call for solutions to address different maybe barriers or challenges per year in CFYE countries and within CFYE countries where we are operating. Such challenges maybe could be like supply-demand issues, job placement, constraints to creating jobs for youth, or maybe improving quality of jobs for young people, specifically the women aged 18 to 35. And actually at the early stage of CFYE, what we do exactly to make sure that we are taking the local context into consideration, that we start with a scoping report in the countries where we are working to make sure that we understand the local context and make sure that the proposed solutions are aligned with the market needs and ultimately making sustainable businesses and sustainable jobs for youth.
At the end of the day, that's exactly what we are working towards. Thank you so much. Quite interesting that you shared that. And you know, you mentioned the early days of CFYE, so I want to move back now to 2019. Feels not so short ago, but it's quite a long time ago. You know, since 2019, CFYE has launched 8 context-specific challenge calls. I would like to ask, how are those challenge calls customized to address the unique job placement constraints and opportunities in those different regions?
Yeah, good question actually, Kevin. So after we start with the scoping report of research in each country, we establish what we call a pipeline of very engaged and high quality applicants. We engage directly with those prospects and do our feasibility and fit exercise. After that, we launch our call for solutions in each country where we are operating.
No, very interesting to hear the pipeline and specifics of what CFYE is doing. Thank you so much for that answer. Andrew, back to you now. You know, it is quite clear that CFYE as an organization, as a consortium, makes sure that the selected projects are relevant and local contexts are respected. But my question now is, how does CFYE make sure that they're also scalable and sustainable within those regions, you know, because at the end of the day, CFYE, just as you mentioned in one of your first answers, they want to leave and have those projects continue to be sustainable. So, can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think we are very intentional from the beginning to think about sustainability and scalability, even during the initial stages of the calls for solutions. And so the intentionality is also embedded in the way we are designed and structured as an organization, as an institution. So first of all, we make sure that we have country leads who are in country, inborn. They know the local context, so they are able to already visualize how these interventions will be helpful and scalable. And so that is an intentional fact that we take. But at the same time, we don't just do it with our country leads. We also work with other local consultants that understand the priorities of the country, so that when we eventually select innovations, those are innovations we already predict will be more appropriate and scalable and effective. The other thing that we also do is that we go through, like, you know, Lina has mentioned a little bit, a very rigorous selection process with scalability and sustainability in mind. That means we look at risk for the projects, we look at the financial viability, we look at all those aspects that are ingredients to sustainability of an intervention. And before we select an innovation, we make sure that they tick off that. We also ensure that our monitoring, evaluation, and learning processes embed learning because we have to also do learning on a go. So we manage for impact. And so as we implement alongside the implementing partners, we make sure that the information we collect builds back into the implementation that they do. That means they, on the go, do modifications based on experiences of the programs that we learn, so that we make sure that the interventions in the go are implementing things that are going to be sustainable and continuous. We also offer technical assistance to our implementing partners, and that is also intentional because we are trying to ensure that whatever they do probably leads to more growth and sustainability, even the jobs that they create. So without capacity building, without training, they may probably not get there. So we try to ensure that we inbuild technical assistance for them. We don't just give them money at the beginning. We also continuously support them to ensure that the jobs they create are more sustainable in the future. And that means probably supporting them to probably build more different activities that will be more sustainable. That also means probably maybe helping them to build their capacity of their internal teams so they are able to continue with the work. Yeah.
Interesting.
So if I may add also, Kevin, to my colleague Andrew, so I think also the additionality element is very important in CFYE. So we make sure that the co-investment provided by CFYE is having this additional element, which is like it couldn't happen without the same time frame or the same way without CFYE intervention.
Yeah, and now was this, were these different approaches, were they specific per region, or was this standardized if we look at the answer that...
I think it's across all the CFYE countries. Yeah, it's part of the selection criteria.
Oh, that's quite really amazing to hear. That's it's clear that tailoring approaches that fits the region is essential to maximizing impact. And maybe I'm a bit biased, but I do think that CFYE is doing that quite well. I'm not only saying that because I'm sitting here with 3 country leads, definitely not. But now we cannot discuss localized solutions for youth employment without talking about the role of youth. And I'm saying that as a young person myself. Andrew, moving now to you. Why is it crucial for local youth, and I'm saying local in terms of the local youth and communities, to take the lead in charting their own employment futures?
Well, I would answer even probably with a question. How do you design an intervention for a youth without involving the youth? I think at the end of the day, when you do that, there will be mismatches because they will not be meeting their priorities. So that's really why, first of all, it's important to engage them, because you are designing an intervention for them. They should be involved in designing it. But at the same time, let's face it, the world will be 1.3 billion people in 6 years, young people. That's a very staggering statistic, and that means that young people form a big mass of people, of the population globally. And so we need to take care of their interests, really, as we do development, because they're a big part of the population boom globally. Maybe just to take an example for Uganda, 78% of Ugandans are young people. So we are ranked as the second youngest population in the world. So we really need to take intentionality in designing interventions that speak to the young people. And so, for example, if I take CFYE, what we basically do, like my colleagues were saying, we do youth aspirations mapping to ensure that young people's needs are taken care of right from the beginning of designing the interventions. And that means they'll be more impactful because we are targeting them as young people. But at the same time, we also have intentionally created these youth advisory committees, which again bring in the young people into the programming so that we are more meaningful in the way that we work with young people. So meaningful participation means we create those committees where young people's voices are continuously heard, continuously when we do the implementation, and that means that we are going to take care of their priorities because we don't have to do it for us, we do it for them.
That's quite insightful, Andrew. And so far we have talked about the importance of involving a specific local youth and local businesses and tailoring the solutions to the local context. Super important. But now I'm curious on something important. I'm curious to hear, how can your commitment to fostering local and private sector partnerships contribute to the achievement of sustainable employment solutions for local communities? Lina, how do you see this?
So so our commitment to our implementing partners and go beyond the co-investment part, Kevin. So it starts from the early beginning of the selection phase till the close out. So we make sure that we go along with the IPs and make sure that we provide them with all the support they need, coaching, mentorship, technical assistance, and we even develop the tools that aligned with their needs and ultimately can create more jobs and even help these businesses to grow and expand after CFYE.
If I can jump in here, Kevin, I think that the fact that there are in-country teams from CFYE, we're constantly supporting our local partners there throughout, from the beginning when they start for the application until the very end. Like Lina said, this constant support from the in-country teams itself, not only the services that we provide, is very important for them and for the growth of their business and the success of their project and ours.
No, very interesting. Thank you so much. It truly is really interesting to hear. And now, I'm curious about the impact of these IPs post CFYE. I think it's important to talk about the sustainability of the work that CFYE is doing. And I would also like to know what challenges your countries or you personally face in terms of integrating these youth employment initiatives in your local economies. And how did you overcome these challenges? Did you even overcome them?
Oh, yeah. So recently we are facing many challenges.
Yeah.
Part of it is we have very limited market in Jordan. So we're at a population of 10 million only, and 3 million out of this 10 is refugees. So also the opportunities for employment are only concentrated in the capital, Amman. Also now the situation of geopolitical tension is also increasing the barriers to integrate any youth initiatives as well. Yeah,
I can imagine. Thank you so much for your insights, in terms of the specific context in Jordan. It's actually very interesting to hear the differences in various local contexts, because exactly what's happening in Jordan in terms of geopolitics is not happening in Uganda, for example, or maybe in another way. So it's quite interesting to hear.
Yeah, I think the tension in the region in general, it's like Levant country, what we call ourselves, is higher maybe than others. So we have some political and economic tension in the region currently,
Yeah, no, interesting. And I want to have a quick quiz now, a quick exam. I want to ask you, what are your main takeaways from this conversation?
So I think localization is going beyond just fostering economies. It's also enhancing the resilience approach, which is a key takeaways given the fast pace where we are living, all of us these days. Digital transformation, maybe also the economic tension, unemployment, limited market, which is all together making the future of young people unpredictable and requiring them to learn continuously new skills, being more responsive, adaptive, and ultimately more innovative, maybe.
No, Ola, up to you.
Yeah, I'd like to emphasize the potential of transformative change with the localized approach. And I think it's very important that we listen to the people we aim to serve at the end of the day, so that we eventually come out with long-term impactful solutions on the ground that will continue long after CFYE leaves.
Yeah, that's a nice way to wrap up. Andrew, last but not least.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's go back with the young people. I think one of the most important things that I like about Challenge Fund is that we have prioritized young people's needs and interests, and I think we need to keep doing that. The reason I say that is that I think we need to create jobs that give young people the hook, like a sense of connection and fulfillment. And I think we need to do that, obviously, looking at the circular economy globally, so putting into the strategy for people, planet, profit as we create the jobs. And I think for us in CFYE and in general, these jobs mean green. So we need to create more green jobs. We need to create more digital jobs, because young people are fascinated by technology. And I think this is where the real impact is going to be going forward.
No, that's where the real impact is going to be going forward. It's a really nice way to end it up. Thank you so much, Ola, Lina, and Andrew, for these incredible insights. I learned so much. Today we discussed and explored how localization is reshaping international development and exactly empowering communities to drive their own progress together with CFYE, but at the end of the day, without CFYE in a sustainable manner. We heard about the importance of putting local voices, or you mentioned that, and specifically youth voices at the forefront, not only for creating relevant, impactful solutions, but also for fostering the resilience that's so incredibly important for the long-term sustainability. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what we're fighting for. CFYE's tailored approach leverages local knowledge and partnerships to create lasting change for youth employment, and that is the best way to move forward. For our listeners, this highlights the building future economies start with investing in young people today, not tomorrow, and ensuring that progress is driven within these communities with help, maybe from outside actors, but at the end of the day, these communities are supposed to be independent and sustainable. This was Future Economies Start with Youth, the podcast, and we'll see you next time.